Hello, everyone. Welcome to iMagination's Magic for Your Future Astrological Lunar Magic Series. This time we are looking at January 28th, 2021, the full moon in Leo. But before we get into that, I would like to roll a land acknowledgement video letting you know the lands of where this production is coming from. So sit back and have a watch.
In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge that together we live, work, and play on this land of the people of traditional Treaty 7 territory. The Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika Kanai Pikani. The Tsuut'ina Nations, Iarhe Nakoda, and Region 3 Métis Nation of Alberta.
Let's bring up our wheel now to start the day. You can see down at the bottom we have the moon in Leo. Again, we are ignoring all of the houses because this is general transits and everybody's house placements would be different depending on their own natal charts and where they are in the world. So, keeping that in mind, let's look at the moon and all the places that it starts. We're going to begin basically looking at where is the actual image for that? That's a moment that's happening. Just 1 second. Okay, I think we're good and we are back. Sorry about that, but we're going to start with the Moon in Leo opposition to a nice cluster of Saturn, Sun, Jupiter, Mercury in Aquarius. So with that being said, let's have a look using tarot cards as well. You'll notice off to the sides that I have some cards here already. These are Moon Oracle cards. The top ones are from The Moon Oracle by Caroline Smith and John Astrup, where Isis, the goddess Isis, is the representation card of Leo. So we're going to get into talking about that at the end, just for a little extra insight, as well as it has some information on the moon phase itself, the full moon of fire. And then we have the Spirit de la Lune options. These are just kind of anchoring down energy for me, so you can see the Spirit de la Lune, shining lovely. And I really enjoy those cards too, where we have a nice, beautiful rendition of the full moon and a statement, fulfillment, and Leo, the hero. So those are just going to be anchoring our site, and we're going to also pull in our tarot cards. So for the full moon in Leo, we have the Priestess card, which represents the moon, and we have the Strength card, which represents Leo. Oppositions, I think we have mentioned before, are when people are sitting across a table, basically. They are opposite to one another. So they have different perspectives when they are looking at a situation. So basically, the moon is going to have an opposite perspective to that cluster. And that cluster is basically Saturn, the Sun, Jupiter, and Mercury. So the World card is Saturn, the Sun is the Sun, Wheel of Fortune is Jupiter, Mercury is represented by the Magician, and they are all in the sign of Aquarius, which is represented by the Star card. So that is a big cluster in opposition, basically. These are key players. These are the energies or different perspectives. So what do we want to start looking with? We'll start with our high priestess. So our subconscious patterns, our habits, our instant responses and feelings, our intuition, etc., our inner knowing, our gut instinct is really in a place of personal power, strength, confidence, self esteem, vitality. It's really about wanting to see that validity being reflected back to you as well by other people. The Leo energy does love recognition and validation. And so, you know, this could very much be like, oh, yeah, my intuition is so on point, and I'm going to tell people about it and get validated through it. That's not entirely the only thing, but that's a way that that can be expressing. And oh dear, you can see my whole setup. Something has happened. Don't you just love technical difficulties? Anyway, we're back. Hopefully that should stay its way this time. So we've got Saturn, which is represented by the World card. And Saturn is very much rules, regulations, institutions. We've been talking about this can very much represent society as we know it. It's about completing cycles in the actual tarot card itself. So it's an ending of a chapter and the continuation into something new, which is also colored by the energy of the star or Aquarius. Hello, autofocus. So we have society, its structures, etc., changing and shifting, ending a cycle of how society was formed and shifting into a new place. We also have the sun, which, since this is everyone experiences, this is like our outward radiance and energy. Again, in the sign of Aquarius. And Jupiter, our great expansive benefactor, the one that brings us good luck and fortune, as well as Mercury, the magician, the person capable of manifesting whatever they desire, who has the unlimited wisdom. Mercury is very much about wisdom of the gods and communicating from the, in mythos from the heavens down through the underworld. It's the only one who's able to pass between them and communicate with all the beings. So we have these four beings, shall we call them, society's structures, how we are expressing ourselves, good fortune and good luck, as well as the ability to bring in whatever we desire, and the Aquarian star, which is trust and intuition. It's about basically the trusting in the divine. Aquarian energy is also about innovation. It's about newness. It's about looking at things in a way that it's never done before. It can also be about fringe or non-typical. So yeah, it's very much a different set of energy than the status quo for sure. And then you have the trusting that this is the way that it should flow. This Aquarian energy, and the image of the water bearer here too, is because of the constellation, which has an interesting mythos of Zeus taking a young, attractive man as his lover, and then making him his cupbearer in the heavens so that he would have a place amongst the gods. And eventually, when this individual passed on, Zeus gave him his constellation of Aquarius to immortalize him in that way. So all of that information is really just to give consideration and extra information to what we are talking about. So our subconscious patterning and our need to feel validated to build our self-confidence is having direct opposition to believing that restructuring society and being able to embody that ourselves and radiate that selves, and believing that it's in good time, in the appropriate time, and that we can actually shift it is having a difficult time. Basically, it's hard to have that trust. Now, both sides want to have the same sort of outcomes. We want to actually feel and believe and be confident in this shift and change, and I'm sure lots of people are also excited for that. But there is tension in the opposition. So both sides need to be able to think um, from the perspective of the other side. It's about negotiation. It's about finding the in-between point. It's about being able to hear mindsets and beliefs and opinions that are not the same as yours and being able to make space for it so that you can have a dialogue and come to the same thing eventually, you know? So this is our training gym. This is where we need to start stepping up our game on thinking and making space for how we feel and how we are helping shift the current landscape and what do we want that to look like, because we have the capability to do so. It is the right time to do so. And, you know, it's time to end that chapter and move on to the next beautiful thing. So let's head back over to our wheel. That is just the first little bit. The next thing that I'm going to want to talk about is, that's a good question actually, so I'm going to have to take a moment. Yes, okay, we're going to talk about, back to our glyph. Hello, glyphs. Wheel. We're going to talk about the Taurus energy, which is over to the left-hand side of the wheel in the upper left quadrant. And you can see that Mars and Uranus are conjunct by 4 degrees in Taurus. So this aspect to the moon gives a square, which is also a challenge energy. This is also the gym environment that we need to be working on to grow and adapt and change and shift. So we have the Tower card, which represents Mars, and then we have the Fool, which represents Uranus, and the Hierophant, which represents Taurus energy. So, square, again, this is not entirely about having opposite perspectives. This might have a lot more tension where it's like coming at you and you don't see it, or it's, you know, a sharp edge where it makes you feel uncomfortable because you don't totally align with it. So, what can we think about that? We can basically think, let's look at, you know, our, the fact that we, sorry, tech issues, the fact that we have Mars as a tower energy, and it's sitting in the energy of Taurus. Okay, this is obviously here based on tarot, but the fact that Mars is fiery and Taurus is earthy, and so Mars kind of slows down and gets sluggish and doesn't have as much a drive and may exacerbate some of the stubborn qualities of that Taurian environment. And it's interesting when you look at it from a tarot perspective where it's the Tower, where this is again that messaging of deconstruction, and the Hierophant, which is very much about societal structures, organizations, institutions. So there is still some tension going on with, again, the trusting your intuition, the guidance that this is, as we said before, in the right time, etc. It's going to be uncomfortable because the Tower deconstructs everything we know. People are jumping out of this one, but it is ultimately to save themselves, and it is deconstructing the systems that we currently have in place. But interestingly enough, the Uranus is represented by the Fool card. So we have this like new beginning, a new pathway that we walk. And I just love that kind of representation through the tarot imagery. It's very inspirational that this is literally the experience and precipice that we are in as we shift communally, globally, societally, however you want to put that. Uranus and Taurus also can have, I think it's fall energy, and so it's not its favorite place to be, and it may feel hard to have any creative inspiration or feel like it's just doing the same thing. So this is a tension of like, we know that it's a time of deconstruction of our systems and that we are going to have a new opportunity to walk a new path to create new systems on the whole. But it's having a hard aspect with like what we feel is right inside and what we think should be the representations, as well as it kind of playing into our individual egos, right? Because of the strength, the Leo aspect. It can be a lot more focusing on the self than the collective, which is more of that Aquarian collective energy. So I'll turn this one off and get us prepped for the next one. We're going to go back to our wheel and we're going to talk about the South Node aspect next. So let's look at that. The South Node is over in the top right quadrant, which is the little blue U shape in the sign of Sagittarius. And it is considered the tail of the dragon, is one way to describe it, and it is the aspects or benefits of natural talents, shall we say, the thing that we can easily do because it's so familiar to us. And we have a trine from the moon to this mathematical point, which is the South Node, which is a point related to the moon that's in Sagittarius. So let's talk about that. This is going to be beneficial energy, or an easily flowing is a better way to describe it because of the trine. And so we have temperance, which is this like stabilized, balanced energy that is representing Sagittarian energy. And you can see this angelic or divine being that's supposedly enlightened up in here and flowing, give and take, cups are full, foot on the earth, foot in the water, divine inspiration, wings for the air, like it's all elements being represented, and the divine pathway of following that road, right? So, one thing that is interesting about the fact that we have good flowing possibilities between the moon is like, yes, it may be more natural for us to think more philosophically, to be more open to newer types of thoughts, right? We may have intellectual discussions. We may want to continue being a global world. We want to share in culture. This is about higher education and balance and inspiration. The interesting thing that I want to point out here also about a trine energy, just because it's easy flowing doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the best thing. It just means it's easy to attain that energy. And one thing that I want to remind people of is that, you could get a little bit preachy or dogmatic with your own beliefs with, that Sagittarian energy because they're your subconscious imprinting, which makes them very deeply rooted in your mind. Given that whole high priestess, so you may be like, this is the way that it needs to be, should be, etc. And you may have possibly discussions that may seem a little soapboxy. So that's not a guarantee. It's just something to be mindful of when we are being open and having discussions, is that we need to be very aware over that there's not a one method fix all kind of deal going on. So we're going to next go back to the chart and we're going to now talk about the North Node, which has just a semi-square going on. And it's in Gemini, so it's the bottom left quadrant, and it's the headphones shape in light blue in Gemini. And this is the area of challenge or growth, the area that we do not have natural talent in. So it's the area where we need to grow. Again, mathematical point. Semi-square is like less irritating than a square, but I still think something important to point out nonetheless. And that's because as a sign is represented by Gemini, which is all about communication and is all about um, intellectual analyzing and data and facts. But, you know, it's also the Lovers card, which is making choices. So, on one hand, looking at it from this perspective, we have issues in being able to communicate with other people, communicate our ideas and what we assume things are facts. And I don't want to get into the fake news, all that kind of stuff, but it's the fact of like communication, um, whether we are too fixed in our ideas and unable to recognize other ideas and have civil discourse around it, that is something that we need to be able to work on. And again, when it comes through from a tarot perspective, it's about making choices to practice that, to work on that, instead of, you may have a knee-jerk reaction and just be like, absolutely not. I do not agree with that, blah. And certainly we are allowed to have our boundaries and we're allowed to have our beliefs, etc. But the area of growth is suggesting in how we communicate with one another and the choices that we make is needing to find ways to harmonize our ability to communicate and not be subconsciously having ego stuff come up and make screaming matches, or a lion could be a little bit of a ferocious experience when it's upset, right? So that's part of the considerations, and it's again in a necessity square, so it's not as strong, but I still think it's like that last little bit of exercise that we need to be continually practicing to build our skill sets. And then the last thing that I want to go and point out next is the Chiron. So we're going to go and look quickly over at the chart, and Chiron is in the upper left quadrant. It's in the sign of Aries. It kind of looks like a K key kind of thing on a ball. And Chiron is our wounded healer. And I think we've been talking about this in this series about this is about our possible like anger issues and uprising and violence, etc. And about traumas and woundings that are attached to anger and rage. So we have the symbols for that here. And it's easy flowing energy. So on one hand, I do want people to be mindful that it's easier to possibly get triggered, to have your wounding stuff come up, and to have triggerings of rage, upsetness, anger issues. So that's one thing to pay attention to. And it will be important to, look into our subconscious patterns, etc., and work on those. Building new foundations with the Emperor energy. But it also allows us to access this energy to heal, because the whole point of the wounded healer is so that there is the medicine within the poison, basically. So another way to say that is that if you know the poison, you can make the antidote. So if you can look at the anger issues, and if you commit to working on them, or the rage, or how triggering is, and garnering more awareness around that, being able to, maybe have communication with people, like this is something that I'm very uncomfortable with, or triggers me, or if we could talk in a different way, or these are the things that I need to feel safe to communicate, etc. These are all just examples. There's lots of work that we all need to do on that. But these things are being brought up right now And it could be very easy for them to come up because of that trine energy, but it's meant to do so that we can be healing lots of anger stuff for the globe. And from a tarot perspective, it's represented by the Emperor. And the Emperor is about building its kingdom, right? Building the world that it wants to be in, setting its foundations down onto the ground and being like, this is what I shall build things on top of. But we need to have stability to be able to do so. And to have stability, we need to have, for example, maybe toiled soil and set in like some structures to level ground and pour concrete down, etc. I'm not actually a builder, so I'm sorry if I got that entirely wrong. But it is that kind of concept that we are going to want to build a new future. And we have to learn from our wounds. We have to learn from the past. We have to learn from the hurts. And that's why they're coming up, is to raise awareness around it. So we're going to do a little bit of a recap. I'm going to take these cards away, and we're just going to go through our glyphs. So we have Booyah! Perspective and tensions between the reconstruction of society, how we exist in it and radiate in it, that it's good timing for it, and that, you know, we are able to bring it into being. And what we believe emotionally and subconsciously, we may have issues being like, no, that's never going to happen, or that's not possible, or whatever that narrative is. There's opposition in perspectives here, and we need to find a way to be able to see them together by working through it, by trying to hold space for the other perspective. So think about, I really encourage you, what kind of society do you want to see? Because we're shifting, we're ending the cycle with the World card and the new one's coming in. And think about it as well, not just for yourself and the benefits for you, right? But also the collective with our Aquarian energy here, right? And be mindful and question yourself on what comes up emotionally, and if those things have like conditioning and patterning that no longer serves you. And so that's the first part. And then we have our square to Taurus, which is very much that tower and the fool. So we have, again, deconstructing is going to happen. It's going to be slow and laborious. It's going to take time. It's not instantaneous. And it's going to be hard because it's hard to like imagine something entirely different. And we want it to happen faster than it is. Okay? But deconstruct the tower so that there is a new place to lay foundations, and that new beginning, that new journey that we can build up anew. And then we have the South Node, so it may be very easy to think in higher level terms, in philosophical terms, ethical, moral values, etc. But we could end up being a little preachy or soapboxy or dogmatic, so be aware of that. And then we also have the need to continue practicing how we communicate with other people and practicing civil discourse. And finally, the healing from our wounds, from our triggers, and from our angers. So that is the energy of this full moon, and there's lots of stuff to work with. And the next thing that I want to do is to be able to share the little cards, because I think it would be interesting to explore. I don't know if you've seen these types of decks, perhaps Spirits of the Moon, but I got the Moon Oracle deck a very long time ago. So the full moon in fire element is keyword recognition. It's in the flowering stage, and the moon is in Leo. And the message here is, this is the sign of the performer, and the full moon in Leo necessitates to putting on a good show. It denotes receiving the acclaim of others. It is a time to rest on your laurels and bask in glory. So that's definitely something to consider. And next, we're going to talk about Isis. in relation to this particular deck, Isis is associated with a Leo. And the key phrases are honesty and integrity get the rewards they deserve. This card meaning the goddess Isis could handle both the traditional male and female roles equally well. She was proud and protective of all that she held dear and would go to the ends of the earth for their well-being. She is an example of faithfulness and power, modesty and sensitivity. I have to take a moment. My arms are weak. Weak, I say. Gotta work out. If this goddess card is chosen, quiet, unobtrusive honesty and determination will be necessary in order to bring about the desired result. Isis is a red goddess and represents the dignity and authority of a ruler. She urges you to take responsibility and lead the way to the solution of the matter in question. The nature of fire in Leo takes command and dispenses justice with fairness. If the Isis goddess card is selected, then August will be a significant month with regards to the question. But I think it's interesting when we think about that as energetic timing. A lot about taking that leadership, that personal radiance of how we're going to shift and change and be representing this new vision that we want to bring into reality. And we can set intentions for fulfillment. Fulfillment. And we can be our own heroes. So, with that being said, we're going to leave it at that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to switch on over to our outro card. This is, again, Imagination, bringing you some astrological food for thought. You can always check out the other things that I can offer and do as services on my website, which is imaginationwitch.com. You can also find me on Instagram. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. I would love to hear your thoughts on how this is affecting you, and if you're working with these energies. And at that, have a great full moon.